everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're so happy to have you here for our very first session of the Navigating New Norms, Harnessing Generative AI for Library Services and Solutions short course. We have an annual short course every year, and we're really excited about this topic this year. Our first speaker is Trevor Watkins, who I will introduce in a second. But I do want to remind you that this is 4 sessions. It is required to attend all 4 sessions in order to receive Medical Library Association continuing education credit. There is the exception of the April 8th session, which we know some people may not be able to attend due to the total solar eclipse at that time, depending on where you live. And so we will be providing the recording after it's concluded for those who want to get caught up in the course. However, this course is best utilized by being present, as we have a lot of interactive participation, which will not be recorded and will be very informing for your use and your practice. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Trevor. Trevor is the Teaching and Outreach Librarian at George Mason University. Stop sharing. And he leads a mini team of 2 staff members on the teaching and learning team, which engages in teaching, special projects, outreach, and library programming for George Mason University libraries. His research interests include artificial intelligence, AI literacy, augmented reality, digital sustainability, and human AI interaction. He's a professional member of iAssist, IEEE, and ACM, and his current projects include the Black Scroll, GNU Linux operating system, Cosmology of Artificial Intelligence, Mason's 3D AR/VR tour, and MOCA, which stands for Mason Libraries Orientation Conversational Agent. So without further ado, we'll let Trevor take over the mic.
Thank you, Peace, and thank you everyone for being here today. I hope you had a great Easter weekend. So I'm looking forward to this course today. But before I get started, what I want you all to do, and Peace, if you can put the link to the Rise Pad in the chat. I want to start off sort of an icebreaker to know, a few questions, like how have you all been using AI in your daily life, or even generative AI? Have you started playing around with it? Obviously, over the last couple of months, over this last year, there's been a lot of hype about generative AI. Artificial intelligence in general is ubiquitous. It has been for over the past 50, 60 years, which a lot of people don't really know. We've always used AI in some form or facet, especially over the last 20 years. But I'm wondering if you know how you've been actually using it over the last year or the last 2 years, or over the last 5 years. So while you're writing, I'm gonna sort of comment on these answers. And everything that you put in here is anonymous. The Rise Pad is a form of the Etherpad, so this is actually encrypted. So no one else can access this unless they have obviously if they have the link. And then after the session today, this link will die. So everything that's in here will disappear. Okay. So someone said uses Chat GPT once when asked by my boss to get ideas for an acronym. Yes, it's very good for that, for creating acronyms, for creating ideas. Predictive text in Facebook, very good. To write uncomfortable letters. That's always a challenge for me, and in some cases, writing emails as well, especially if it's dealing with a situation that's pretty complex. Sometimes it could take me 20 to 30 minutes. So I must admit, I have used ChatGPT, and also I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with Grammarly. It also uses artificial intelligence, different techniques in AI, but it also has a generative AI aspect to it as well. So you can also generate text too. So I also use that. So that's like and also, if you're checking for plagiarism, those kind of things. Partner with faculty to discuss AI in the medical libraries, participating in workshops like this, okay. Help me write a donation letter, okay. Be very good. Gemini, so that's good to see. I think at the start, well, obviously, ChatGPT sort of shot out the gate. And I think within 5 days, there were over 1 million users, which was unprecedented, which is still unprecedented. They've made a lot of money. I think the last valuation I think they're at $1 trillion valuation. So that's pretty fast. Mid-Journey, yes, if you're using text to image generators, Canva, Claude 3. And that's another great point because a lot of the tools that you probably might use, I consider myself a self-taught graphic designer. So I've used Adobe products for quite some time, and the success of DALL-E or Midjourney has forced Adobe to create its own large language model, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on in this presentation. But it's still some limitations with Midjourney and some of those things we're going to discuss. But a lot of the applications that you use every day now are using generative AI. It is now a part of that application. Word 365, grammar and style suggestions, absolutely correct. Autocomplete, and I'm going to talk about some of the algorithms that's responsible for that, like Markov. So generative AI, people think that this is a new concept, but actually it is not. I'm going to talk about that as well. Copilot. Okay, I know there's a lot of universities that are using Copilot. Teen harvesting for systematic reviews, very good. I've been to quite a few workshops and conferences where they're using generative AI for systematic reviews. Navigation system for vehicles. I'm going to talk about autonomous vehicles a little bit later. Google Photos, very good. Okay, excellent. All right, the next question. What comes to mind when you hear the phrase generative AI? And here's why I see someone said Midjourney, Canva. Tried out ChatGPT in order to see if there was better ways to state things or paraphrase things. We've used Outright to modify emails. Okay, so that's good. A lot of you, I've never heard of Outright. So that's another tool that's out there. At the end of this session, I'm going to provide a link, which I didn't provide to P, so I apologize. But it's called the AI Guru. You can probably Google that now if you have a browser up. But according to AI Guru, there are over 4,657 applications since the AI hype around ChatGPT. So you have a lot of businesses, a lot of companies, a lot of individuals that's been creating applications. Some of them for paying, $5, $10, $15.99. So it has become lucrative, but it's also saturated because there are so many applications that are out there. And then also some of your applications can be powered by ChatGPT or some of these other generative AI applications or large language models. Okay, very good. Playing around with prompts. All right, very good. So the next question, if a machine could create something entirely new, what's something you'd be excited to see it make? And okay, answer hard questions. Perplexity gives references, very good. Wrote about using it to help lesson plans. That's very good too. Assessments. I'm starting to see a lot of assessment librarians that are starting to use it for assessment. We're actually talking about leveraging generative AI for some future assessment projects. So, for example, we're transitioning from Blackboard to Canvas. So we also have to transition the LibGuides to there from Blackboard to Canvas as well. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're over the summer we're going to come up with a research project where we're going to leverage generative AI, probably ChatGPT or Gemini, to create an assessment project. Code, so I don't have to keep up with Python. Yes, I'm actually in Chicago last week before Easter, and I talked to one of the systems analysts at the University of Chicago in the library, and he talked about how he uses he uses generative AI for coding for linked data. And there's a lot of metadata librarians that are using it for metadata. So it's been leveraged in a lot of different ways. And coding, I've used it for coding as well. So using it as a pair programmer is something else that you can use it for. Complete gardening plan. Okay, that's very good. So if you want to get into doing some sort of hobby and, you have limited, or you may have some experience in it, you can get additional ideas on how to better garden. So that's really good. I know one thing, so most of you are probably healthcare professionals. One way that I've been using it is to better, my health. So, if you go to the doctor tells you, okay, you have this issue, we're going to prescribe you this medication. And if you read the ingredients on that medication, of course, obviously, I'm not a doctor and I'm not in the healthcare um, um, field, so I don't know what those chemicals, or I don't know what that means. So what I've done is I'll go and I'll use ChatGPT, and I'll search for those specific chemicals in that medicine, see if I can actually find articles where there's clinical trials. And also, because I'm an African American, those types of medicines might work differently on me than they may on my counterparts. So I also try to find information pertaining to that. I might also look in preprints, for that information, in databases, whether it's behind the paywall. So if you're a part of a university or you're part of a consortium where you have access to Elsevier, PubMed, SciFinder, those kind of databases, or outside of the paywall, where it's open, and there are some, like Elsevier has some open access. And then you have the directory of open access journals, where you can also get some of that information too, or you can specifically go to, some of these health facilities, or you can go to the government sites to, get some information off of there. So I've definitely used it for that. Grant searching and grant writing, very good. All right, so you've all used this, or most of you seem to have already been using this, and that's very good. All right, so again, my name is Trevor Watkins. I am a teaching and outreach librarian. And the title of this presentation today is Navigating a New Horizon, an Introduction to Generative AI and its Transformative Potential. I know, like, you've all probably, seen it, during the sort of rise of this AI hype, and it's still there. A lot of people talk about the negative aspects of generative AI, and certainly it comes with its problems, but it does have a lot of transformative potential, and I'm going to discuss that today. So the learning objectives for today, we're going to summarize artificial intelligence and its subsets. So before we even discuss generative AI, I think it's important that we talk about AI in general and its subsets. And then we're going to distinguish generative AI from those subsets. We're also going to describe some historical context and some major milestones toward developing large language models and generative AI. Like I mentioned before, there are other instances of generative AI models that predate what you see today. I'm going to point out one of those. We're also going to define some key concepts. So you've probably heard large language models. If you looked around, if you've been to webinars, people might have mentioned, okay, this is a large language model. All generative AI, the backbone of generative AI is large language models. But I'm going to go in a little bit more detail into what large language models are composed of. And how, and the importance of ontologies and taxonomies to mitigating sort of some of the errors, some of the issues that you see, some of the biases that you see. We're also going to talk about natural language processing, deep learning, taxonomies and ontologies, as I said before, structured knowledge, and transformers. And then we're going to delve a little bit into those applications. Some of you have already highlighted that you've played around with it. Some of you may not. So I'm going to compare and contrast GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. I know that they're working on another GPT model, and then look at some of the other GPTs that you have access to should you purchase the GPT 4. All right. So I'm sure you've probably heard various definitions of artificial intelligence, but in a nutshell, AI is a broad field of computer science that focuses on solving problems through the use of various techniques. And when I say techniques, that means the algorithms, and that's what sort of exhibits human intelligence. So this includes problem solving. It includes reasoning, it includes learning. It also includes natural language processing. And so here's a reference if you want to know a little bit more about that. This is a really, really good article on AI and the AI ecosystem. Some of the subsets of AI are, as I mentioned before, natural language processing, machine learning, and deep learning. I'm going to go a little bit further into details about those subsets in later slides. And I'm going to briefly explain the last two, which are expert systems and neural networks. Okay, so expert systems, which is currently what I'm using to develop the conversational agent, or another word for that would be chatbot, but it's a little bit more sophisticated than that. Which I'm developing for Mason libraries. They're designed to mimic the decision-making skills of a human expert within a specific field. So like medicine or engineering or finance or architecture, any of those things. Or if you think about criminal justice, judges have used expert systems. Lawyers have used expert systems. Now they're using generative AI, but expert systems is a subset of AI where decision-making skills of a human expert are used. So that knowledge consists of facts. It consists of rules and procedures that's relevant to that particular field, whatever that field is. So for example, if you think about the knowledge of a dermatologist, right? Regarding different skin conditions. So if you have a certain skin condition, a dermatologist is trained. They went and got that medical degree, so they know most skin condition. They know some of the symptoms, and they know some of the best treatments. So if you were to take the knowledge from that dermatologist, create a model, and put that into a system, and add all of the different types of skin conditions, all of the different types of systems and treatments into that particular system, it can then retrieve that information if you prompted or if the dermatologist prompted it if they were seeing you. So example, let's say you upload a photo of a rash that you have. Maybe you were outside, maybe you were hiking, and you got a rash. And of course, you might put down some of the symptoms that you experience, maybe the color of the rash, whether it's itching, how thick the rash is, those kind of things, right? That is then put into the system because you're inputting that information in. The system then compares the information that you just inputted to what's already in its knowledge base, right? And so what it does then is it tries to match the symptoms to possible skin conditions and comes up with a diagnosis along with the reasoning behind that diagnosis. And it's all based on that knowledge base. Neural networks, so imagine you're a real estate agent, right? Or if you're getting ready to buy a house or you're getting ready to sell your house, which, during the pandemic, that was, things went crazy. And it's still crazy now. And you have Zillow, you have all of these different applications or different websites where you can go and you can get this information. Well, some of those applications are actually using neural networks. So if you're a real estate agent, buyer, seller, you want to use a tool to help estimate house prices. And so if you want to sell your house and you want to, okay, this is what I think my house is worth, or this is what, some of the comps in the area, meaning some of the prices that other houses sold in the area, or, the square footage of your house, the number of bedrooms in the house, the number of acreage, the location of your house, recent sale prices in the area, as I just mentioned. All of those things affect the final price. So the neural network will consider those as inputs. Then you feed the network tons of historical housing data. So that includes all the factors that I just mentioned and actual sales prices. So after the neural network is trained on that particular data, it can then take information about a new house and it can predict a potential sale price, right? So that's one way how neural networks are actually used or leveraged. Natural language processing. So some of you have already talked about this. You've used some of the AI assistants or used some of these like Hey Google or Alexa, Ring or Siri. So natural language processing is also an AI technique that focuses on the interaction between humans and computers, or human language, computers and human language. So for example, if any of you have an iPhone, you've probably used Siri. If you have an Echo, or if you have Ring, like I have Ring for my house, or if you have a smart TV, you can use Alexa to turn the TV on, to pick a channel. And you've probably seen this commercial with Google where say, hey, Google, that's sort of the prompt. And what is the weather today? Or what is, what's the 5 top restaurants that are near me? So some of the things that you would probably Google before, you can kind of use ChatGPT or Gemini to do that. But what happens during that whole entire process is first, the assistant needs to recognize your voice, right? So that's called voice recognition. So that's also a subset of AI. So using natural language processing, the voice assistant converts your spoken words into text. So those natural language processing algorithms then process the audio signal to recognize the words that you've actually said. The assistant then uses natural language processing to understand the context and intent behind your words. So a common thing that I usually ask is, especially before, early in the mornings, I usually get up 4 or 5 o'clock, have to walk my Yorkie. He's irritated because he wants to get out the house, but he hates the rain. So, one of the things I ask is, okay, hey, Alexa, what is the forecast today for, to College Park, Maryland, which is where I reside. And it'll give me it'll give me that information. So based on the intent recognized, the assistant then decides what action to take. And then it uses natural language processing again to generate a natural language response. So in other words, the weather today will be sunny. It'll be a high of 56 degrees, a low of 30 degrees, or I might ask it a 5-day forecast, or I might ask it a 7-day forecast. So the voice assistant then converts this text response back into speech, and that's when you get that actual weather forecast. So another technique involved in this, because it's not just natural language processing, even though it's a major part of that with these assistants, is what's called computational linguistics. So with computational linguistics, it focuses on the computational aspects of human language capability. So that involves understanding syntax, the structure of sentences. It also involves semantics, the meaning of words. It also involves pragmatics, so how the language is being used and in what context. And computational linguistics is key in enabling voice assistants to support other languages as well. So if you speak other languages, or if you have, let's say you go, like I was in China a couple of weeks ago at a conference, and I used Siri, and I also used Google for for language translation while I was there. Worked very good. I was able to get around. And then obviously there's other applications that you can use too. But it understands those different languages and dialects. Machine learning. Machine learning is a technique in modern AI that involves training models to make predictions or decisions without being explicitly programmed for a specific task. So a really good example of machine learning, and you see as you see here, I'm pretty sure everyone here probably has a Netflix account, or you might have Peacock, or you might use Amazon videos. So you've already sort of seen that. And you have those recommendation systems. The same thing for social media. You see TikTok, as we have here, although I don't know how long we'll have access to it. But we also have YouTube as well. So if you've been on any of those platforms, you'll notice that there's recommendation systems, or those algorithms based on what you watch will predict or will suggest other types of videos or other types of content that you might want to, review or look at. So initially what happens is that platform collects data about your interactions with the platform. So for Netflix, it shows you, it shows what you watch, when you watch it, what genre, is it horror? Is it sci-fi? And then it'll make recommendations based on what you used in the past, and also what other users that are actually using Netflix, if they're looking at similar types of videos or that particular movie, this is something that you might also try to, also may consider. So for Amazon, same thing. It looks at, how you browse, what you purchase, and what you're viewing in terms of those products. And then also music that you listen to, and movies as well. So after that data is gathered, it will then, or the algorithms then analyze that data to identify patterns in your behavior in terms of what you enjoyed or what you dislike, because you also have that thumbs up. So after you watch a video, you can also say, I liked it or I disliked it. So it takes account all of that information. So if I watch the Avengers and, let's say you watch the Avengers and then you watch Wonder Woman, then it'll say, okay, you might want to watch Wonder Woman. So it predicts what I'm going to like, again, based on what I've used in the past and what other users have been looking at. Deep learning. So deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which also makes it a subset of artificial intelligence. It employs a multi-layered artificial neural network. And I talked about neural networks a couple of slides ago. But to talk a little bit more about neural networks are modeled by the structure of the brain in terms of nodes. And it excels in applications like image recognition and natural language processing. So deep learning is used in a lot of applications. So if you use Google Maps, deep learning is used in that. That's not the only technique that's used in Google Maps, but it is one of the major techniques that's used in Google Maps. So if you're trying to get around and if you're using that application, I'll get a pop-up that says, hey, home is 45 minutes away, or you're going down the wrong street. So if you're going down a one-way street, I'll get a notification of that. Also, you're probably aware that some autonomous vehicles, and I think someone mentioned this earlier when we were in the RISE pad, deep learning is used a lot in autonomous vehicles, specifically for computer vision, which is also another subset of artificial intelligence. So it allows the vehicle to detect objects, and I'm talking about computer vision, like pedestrians, other vehicles, traffic signs, and other objects that you will normally see when you are operating vehicles. The camera feeds that data into a deep learning model, which also allows it to understand the objects at a pixel level and then keeps track of where the vehicle is within its lane. So I've seen a couple of documentaries on, or now I wouldn't say documentaries, but a couple of reports or vlogs on how some of these startups, there's a lot of startups now that's popped up around autonomous vehicles. And you probably all see Tesla, and that's probably the most well-known, but there are a lot of other different companies that are actually testing autonomous vehicles, and they're actually on the road right now. So when that data is fed into that deep learning model, it's also using information from other sensors as well. And so some of those sensors are LiDAR, which uses a light from a laser, radar, which creates sort of a comprehensive picture of that environment or those surroundings. And it doesn't matter how difficult the conditions are. So if it's snowing, if it's raining, if there's a fog, or if the light is not that high, or it's not bright, if it's lower light in that particular environment, it's proven to work pretty well. So these companies are testing these things out. I don't know if they'll completely replace human vehicle or human drivers, or we'll see more of a heterogeneous driving experience where you have self-driving cars out there with regular drivers, which would be a recipe for disaster because a lot of regular people don't know how to drive, especially in the area that I am, in the DMV area. A lot of nuts here, driving out here. But another example of deep learning is your camera phones. So if you use your camera phones to take pictures, your smartphone is equipped with camera apps that use deep learning to improve the photo quality. And it also has other advanced features that you can use, like object recognition. So you can zoom in on a specific face. You probably all know this already. Or landscapes, or if you have pets, or being able to pick and choose certain objects, maybe that's in the background versus in the foreground. So it does all of those different things, and it adjusts those settings. The AI adjusts those settings for you, so you don't have to necessarily do that. So it changes the exposure, it changes the focus, it changes the color balance, and it does that in real time to capture the best possible photo. Obviously, you can go back in and you can edit that photo. You can also take that and put it in Dali or Midjourney, and you can edit that photo. But it takes high quality photos in low light. And deep learning is also using biometrics. So if you also have an iPhone and you use Face ID, again, that's another way of using deep learning, because what it does is once you take your picture, I haven't used it because I don't want my face, I don't want my fingerprints on anything. I don't want any of my bio data in any system where a corporation has. I mean, I can understand using it as a safety precaution, but there's always, sort of that sort of dichotomy, right? But it analyzes thousands of features on your face, and it can distinguish your face from others. So even later down the line, if you grow a beard, or if you cut all your hair off, if you take it initially and you have a beard, or if you wear glasses, it'll still recognize your face. So that's gotten really, really good. Generative AI. So generative AI also is a subset of AI, but is a type of deep learning model that focuses on creating new and original content, which you all know. It's important to note that generative AI, like I mentioned earlier, is not a new concept. So there was a Russian mathematician, his name was Andrei Markov, and in 1906, he introduced one of the first generative AI concepts. And it was called, I can't think of the name of it, the Markov chain. So it was called the Markov chain. So that's one of the first early examples of generative AI. Obviously, it's not to where it is now, but that's where I guess its genesis started. So it goes back as far as 1906. However, the Markov chain is still being used today. So if you think about autocomplete, irritates me sometimes if I'm texting people. It just does, it suggests things, or it automatically puts in text that I don't put in. So if you run into those kind of problems, you can thank Andrei Markov for that. But it is still being used today. Autocomplete is one of the functionalities, or one of the functions of using the Markov chain. But again, unlike traditional AI models that analyze data, generative AI can produce its own text, it can produce its own images, it can produce its own music, and it can produce its own music, and also coding, which is something someone else mentioned in the Rise Pad. One of the things that I found really fascinating when generative AI and I've been following OpenAI for quite some time, and I was kind of displeased when they initially said that they were going to, everything was going to be open. As you've probably seen in the news, Elon Musk is suing them now. But obviously they saw the money that they could make off of it, and everything now is proprietary. It's the same thing as Google. Everything is proprietary. Their large language model is proprietary. The type of, and even for Gemini, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, what type of large language model that it is, they have that under wraps as well. So they mention in some of the papers, and also if you go to the website, or if you go to Gemini, or if you even prompt it about itself, it'll tell you that it's proprietary information, so you can't get that information. But getting back to what I was mentioning, one of the things that I did not think would be possible, and I'm a big jazz head. I didn't think it would be possible for generative AI to be able, or AI to be able to improvise the way a jazz musician can. And so I've seen this on a couple of YouTube videos where it's actually able to do that. And as you further understand the use of deep learning and neural networks, that is how it's possible to do that. But I found that to be really fascinating. And now you probably see, there was some controversy. Some musicians are saying, oh, now I get to work with this artist who's been dead for the last 50 years, last 30 years. There's obviously issues about ethics, which you'll hear from Dr. Kelly Owens a little bit more about that. So I'm not going to touch into that. But the ethical considerations for that, and also copyright, that's obviously at the forefront for that. And there's numerous lawsuits that are out and they're still out regarding that. But some of the most common generative AI models, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but the thing about generative AI is that it's basically trained on massive data sets. And so those data sets, and another word that we call it is corpus, Wikipedia, which according to ChatGPT, they use Wikipedia. They also use books. They also use articles, code. So any type of programming language that you can think of, whether it's C++ or Rust or Java or Python or R, that's actually a problem in our Digital Scholarship Center. We have, and this is something that some of our consultants talked about, where some of the students are actually using generative AI to write the code for R for some of their projects, but they're not learning the fundamentals or learning how R works. They're not learning the syntax and the concepts. They're just feeding and using generative AI to do that for them. So that's one of the issues, is you don't want to rely on the technology, because if somehow this is pulled, because that could be possible, or maybe we may have one of these solar flares where the internet and all of our electronic devices go dead, which would be tragic. You don't want to have an over-reliance on that. And that's some of the things that I tell students, and I also tell people that I come in contact with when they're using these type of applications. Use them as tools, but don't use them as to, this is, I'm going to depend on this, with my life for everything that I do. Use it as a tool. All right. Some of the most common generative AI models are what's called GANs, or generative adversarial networks. So for those of you that are in the healthcare field that are on this call, or on this call today, on this Zoom call today, it's using X-rays. And two neural networks, which is how it works, two neural networks work in competition, which leads to a highly realistic content generation of those medical images. So X-rays is one, MRIs is another way. It can also supplement real data for training medical AI systems. I'm pretty sure you all heard of deepfake videos. GANs are also used to detect deepfake videos. So if you don't know what a deepfake video is, if you've been on YouTube and you've seen the sort of fake advertisements where, they might have President Biden's voice, but it's not him actually saying those words, or they manipulate the video, but they have that voice, or they put the head of some celebrity on the body of someone else in the video. It's very elaborate, and we actually did it. I actually did a sandbox here at Mason where we had librarians and faculty come, and we looked at some of the software and how deepfake videos work. But GANs can actually detect deepfake videos. But it also can be used to generate molecular structures for new drugs. So chemists are now using this generative AI for that particular purpose. One thing that I tried to see was whether or not, or how during COVID-19, and this is one of the things I'm sort of searching right now, did they actually use any generative AI, even though at the time it wasn't as, it wasn't to the height that it is right now. It's still sort of in research mode. But as you know, governments typically have certain access to certain things before the general public does. But I haven't been able to find that information. But it's also something like I mentioned before, when I'm looking at drugs, and if I'm being prescribed drugs, I'm not looking at the chemical structures or the molecular structures of it. Um, but again, that's one of the ways that it's actually being used. Also, you have transformers, which is ChatGPT 3 and 4. And like I mentioned before, although Google does not explicitly say that Gemini is a transformer, we can sort of assume that it is, because the backbone of most generative AI models, or LLMs are using transformers. But it is powerful for text generation and the basis for ChatGPT 3 and 4. The acronym GPT stands for generative, which generates text, produces sentences, and output based on the input it receives from a prompt. And then, of course, you can use prompt engineering, which again, I'm going to show maybe one or two instances of that. But I believe that Michael is going to talk a little bit about that on April 15th, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. Also, it's used to be trained on large and diverse data sets. And the transformer, which is a neural network, is built on, allows it to process sequences of data. And that helps it to understand context and relationships between word and text. So what are large language models? So when I started watching a lot of videos about large language models, I didn't really see much information about, how large language models were created or what they entail. And obviously, ChatGPT, Gemini, those large language models are proprietary. However, there are some open source large language models. That's probably one of the next things that I'm going to research or take a look at, but they are available. Facebook has a LLM that's open source, and I think there's a couple of others as well. But LLMs are also a subset of artificial intelligence, and it's a type of AI system designed to understand, generate, and work with human language on an extremely large scale. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So LLMs, like GPT, are a very crucial part of the foundation of generative AI, particularly in the realm of natural language processing and generation. LLMs have significantly advanced the ability of AI to generate coherent, contextually relevant, and sometimes creative textual content, which you've seen if you've already used ChatGPT or some of the other generative AI tools that are out there. And this includes everything from writing articles. Some of you talked about writing emails, creating music, generating code. And like I mentioned before, in just about every programming language that I've tested out, even some of the programming languages that are considered legacy languages like Pascal, even though it's still being used. But it's very pivotal in the development of generative AI. So beyond generating text, LLMs are pivotal in developing AI's understanding of human language. So some of LLMs are considered foundation models because they're trained on a broad data set. And then it's fine-tuned for specific tasks. I know ChatGPT at one point mentioned that their language model, or it was spewing out some racist output, so they had to go back in and they had to retool their LLM to mitigate that kind of stuff. So that's still something that you see, but there's ways, and I'm going to talk about taxonomies and ontologies in ways to sort of mitigate that. And there are a couple of different types of foundation models. Like I mentioned, GPT-4, 3 and 4 created by OpenAI, BERT, which is developed by Google, and Ernie, which is developed by Baidu. So where does large language models fall short? They fall short in true understanding. So what that means is LLMs, they look for patterns, right? We talked about that. And it can predict next words or phrases. They do not possess, nor do they have the ability to possess true understanding of something or exhibit or possess common sense in the same way we do. So for example, one of the things that we asked, and I asked it again, and it still wasn't able to differentiate. You know, I was like, did Mary have a little lamb? So how am I asking that question? I could be asking if Mary had a little lamb, you know, in terms of gave birth to a little lamb, or maybe she had a little lamb, maybe she ate that lamb. So there's all different sort of if I prompt ChatGPT to answer that particular question, it may resort to, okay, this is a this is sort of a Mary had a little lamb, I forget what that's called, but it may resort to that, or it may respond in that way. But it doesn't, and so if I prompt it again, one of the things I did was prompt it again was, well, I'm talking about, did Mary have a little lamb? Did she eat the lamb? And ChatGPT just froze up, did not know how to respond to that. So other things is LLMs can produce factual errors. In other words, it can present incorrect facts, especially if the data that it's being trained on has bias in it, or if that data is misleading. So if you think about false facts, so for example, if I said Thomas Jefferson was, or let's say I asked it, what's the first president of the United States? And this is just hypothetical. It does not necessarily mean that, ChatGPT and Gemini will respond in this way. But this is some hypothetical examples of what could happen. It could say Thomas Jefferson was the first president. So that's an example of a false fact. When the first president was George Washington and Thomas Jefferson was the third. Another one in terms of health sciences, drinking a glass of bleach every day will boost your immune system. So let's just say hypothetically, you get that as output. Certainly, I hope people wouldn't run and do that. Also, we saw during the pandemic, some people actually, with misleading information on social media, actually drank bleach. But you get that kind of response, or any of those responses, especially when it comes to health. You also always want to make sure you cross-check that. Another type of scenario would be 98% of all car accidents are caused by texting and driving. We know it's not that high. It could be possibly lower, but hypothetically, in that particular training data, that information might be there. So again, it depends on the people that are creating or using this data set, where they're gathering that information from. If any false information is in there or in that data, that could be a problem. And again, an LLM could produce nonsensical output that doesn't follow any sort of logic or grammatical rules. All right. The last couple of slides before we get into playing around with some of these applications is ontologies and taxonomies. So I attended the Ontology Summit back in February, and there's actually, this video is actually available now if you Google it. But there is one of the authors of this presentation. His name is John Sowa, S-O-W-A. The title of this presentation was Without Ontologies, LLMs are clueless. Large language models are clueless, right? So how does taxonomies and ontologies play? What role do they play in large language models? First, structuring knowledge. I talk about structured knowledge. You can organize knowledge using taxonomies. Taxonomies provide sort of a structured way to classify concepts and their relationships. So for all of you that are here that are librarians and you went to an I school, you know that you've probably taken a class on information architecture. And you've discussed taxonomies and ontologies. So you probably all already know what that is and know what that means. So LLMs can be trained on taxonomies to understand how different words and concepts are related. And it can improve the understanding of language, right? Also, contextualization. Taxonomies provide context. So it helps with disambiguity. So if you have words that have different meanings, if you sort of have a taxonomy that's in place, so for example, if I say bank, a bank can be a financial institution, a bank can also be the edge of a river. So in what context am I using the word bank in relation to the prompt? And so if you have a taxonomy that's in place and the LLM is trained on that, it sort of mitigates some of the errors or some of the issues that I talked about in the previous slide. Also, ontology. So ontologies show complex relationships between entities and logical rules that govern them. So again, LLMs that are trained on ontology have more reasoning capabilities. So if we're talking about being able to mitigate bias, if you are working on, let's say you're working on an LLM, and there are a lot of different universities now, just read an article last week, where there are a lot of universities that are now creating their own large language models and creating their own generative AI tools to be used at the university, rather than having students use ChatGPT and Gemini. So this is sort of in play right now. And I can see other institutions, I can see, some of these large hospitals like Cleveland Clinic, or, John Hopkins, they'll probably follow suit and they'll create that. Which again, if it's a specialized domain, like healthcare, and you're not trying to, emulate, or you're not trying to, look at all things like general intelligence, and there's an argument, whether general intelligence really exists. But if you're focusing on one specific LLM and that, in this instance, one specific domain like healthcare, and again, if you're using that taxonomy and ontology, that can help reduce potential biases, and it can help with the reasoning in large language model, when you're using that generative AI tool. All right. So we have about 30 minutes left. So now it's time to play in the sandbox. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing this screen. Okay. So this is ChatGPT. Pretty sure all of you, and I think some of you have already alluded to that, you've been playing around with it. So you already know that we're at version 3.5. And again, with version 3.5, there's a cutoff in terms of, when it was the data that was actually last trained on. Now with GPT-4, you still have, I think it goes up to 2023, and I think Gemini is the same, but now it has access to the internet, right? So, if you prompt it for something, it'll go and it'll search the internet, and that helps with its decision. So on the one hand, you get up-to-date information. On the other hand, that opens you up to more disinformation or misinformation. So you definitely want to make sure that you're double checking your information once you get that as output. Now, if you're asking it factoids, because it still has the ability to potentially give false information or false facts, you still want to sort of check on that as well. All right, so before prompting, as you can see, you already have a couple. If you're new to this, so for those of you that are on the call, you've never used ChatGPT before. Before you even begin, here are a couple of things. So if I wanted to click on that and ask it to write me, a historical, or ask me about historical era. No, fascinating. I'll use that as craft to create time. Okay, so it's it's asking me, or I asked it based on the information that was there. Can you start by asking me about a historical era I'm fascinated by, and we'll use that to craft a time travel story. So I'm going to say I am fascinated with the 80s. So I was born in the 70s. The 80s to me, love 80s music. Michael Jackson, Madonna, Prince. And obviously that's, in my early teenage years. So for me, the 80s were a great time. So here I prompted and said, okay, the 1980s, and now it created sort of a small but antiquated time travel story, right? So I could also, let's see, something else that I'll be interested in. Let's say, can you turn this into a script that I can use to create a YouTube video? So this is Grammarly, as you can see. So now I took that story and it created a script outline. So if I'm getting ready to do a YouTube video, if I'm a content creator, if I don't have any ideas, or let's say I have an idea, let's say I'm working on TikTok, and this is something that a lot of content creators are doing now. Obviously, if you're creating content, you need a story, you need a storyboard, you need a dialogue tree, and that can be like a script. So I can take a story, or I can tell it, this is what my platform is about. This is what's sort of recent right now that's in the news. I know you're all, there's a lot of stuff going on in the news. So let's say my platform is political. I can sort of ask it, something about politics, and then, ask it to generate a story, write a script that I can use similar to this. And then I can come in here and I can sort of copy, paste that in, and edit it how I see fit, or either edit it, come in and plug that back in and ask it to review it and add additional information, or add more to the script, or make the script longer, or this needs to be a 5-minute clip. How long does the script need to be? So you have all of those different things that you can do. So with GPT 3.5, you're probably not going to see this because I do have a subscription to ChatGPT 4.0. This is still going to be viewable. And then also, again, for those of you online that have never used ChatGPT 3.5 or ChatGPT at all, over on the side, you'll have a history of your prompts. So a little bit later on, you can come in to say you add another prompt. So you click here for a new chat, right? So if I say sum up World War II for a school project, again, I'm just, using what's already there, and then you can prompt it to ask other information here. As you can see now, I have another prompt. So on the one hand, if you're using ChatGPT, and this is something, and this is one of the reasons why I asked you all to create separate Google accounts today for when we use Gemini. I'm going to quickly demo that, and then we're going to use some time to actually go through it. Is there, they're using the data that you're putting in here to further train their models. So if there's something in here that you don't want, or if there's something that you don't want in here, you can actually opt out of it. But I would also say immediately delete it as well. But again, you can't really trust corporations because they have a habit of saying one thing and then doing something completely totally different. But again, that's something to be mindful of. Same thing with Google. Although, and someone, have said this, so I can't, take credit for this. If you're using a product for free, that means you are the product. So if you're using 3.5 and there's not a pay, you're the product. So any information you put in, they're using your information or using your data. Similarly, if you're paying for it, they're still using your data. So it's $20 a month, but they're also making more money on the back end because they're using the data that you put in it to further train those LLMs. All right. So if you have 3.4, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There were a few questions in the Q&A.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So I was gonna just interject those in real quick, if that's all right. Um, the first question is, how can we find out if an AI was trained using a taxonomy or ontology?
That's a very good question. If it is a large language model that's open source, that information is available. So let's say if you go to Facebook's large language model, you'll be able to get that information. And one thing that you can actually use, if it's an actual, what's the word? If there are some articles about it, which I think ChatGPT has written articles about, well, they're obviously their LLM. Um, they don't explicitly say that they use a taxonomy ontology, but if it has improved immensely, they're using taxonomies and they're using ontologies. This is something for people that that are in the field that uses taxonomies and ontologies. Usually, you'll have someone. So let's just say you're getting ready to create an LLM. The people that you'll have on staff that's involved in the creation of that will be someone that specializes in taxonomies and ontologies, right? So the only way that you can, unless you're building it or if they explicitly say it, if they open up that information to you where it's open source and you can see it, that's one way that you can determine if it's being trained using taxonomies and ontologies. If it's a lot low, so you can also, I think I used ChatGPT earlier. So some of the questions and answers or the way that it answered questions has improved. So that for me is evidence that they're using taxonomies and ontologies. And this is also, if you go to some of the conferences, they are also talking about this in research articles too. So this is one way that they're improving LLMs by using taxonomies and ontologies. So that's a great question. Reducing potential biases via ontology and taxonomies. This is from Christina. Doesn't that still depend on what it was fed? Well, what it's fed, the data that it's fed in terms of your input, if that's what you're asking. Again, on the back end, when you create an ontology and that taxonomy of a structure of information or knowledge. So for again, when I mentioned bank can be represented as a financial institution or the edge of a river, right? So in that ontology or in that taxonomy, I've created that structure that's there. So if I feed data into it, it then takes that and it compares and contrasts what's in that input to what's already on the back end in that taxonomy or that ontology. So what happens then is before you get that output, it then mitigates, whatever that response. So if without, let's say you don't have that ontology or taxonomy, or if that taxonomy or ontology is flawed, let's say it's not put together correctly, or there are certain things that was let out, and you have to go. So if you take, again, if you know about ontology and taxonomy, in some cases, as information, you get information, obviously it's dynamic. So as you get more information, you have to also update the ontology and the taxonomy. So it still compares and contrasts what's already sort of in the knowledge base or what's in that particular structure in the LLM versus what you prompted, and as what it spits out as output. Okay, so Lauren asks, how do you have a go-to diagram to explain the interactions between all of these AI subcategories? I'm trying to create a mental mode. In addition, can deep learning be neural networks, but not all neural networks be deep learning? That is absolutely correct. In terms of your first question, I don't have a specific diagram, but as Peace mentioned at the beginning, there is a current project that I'm working on called the Cosmology of Artificial Intelligence. And this is one of the actual things that we're working on, is a visualization that shows the relationships between artificial intelligence, all of these different concepts, because some of these sub-concepts or subcategories actually overlap. So I'm glad that you actually mentioned that, because that's exactly what that's exactly what we're trying to do. If you email me a little bit later, I can tell you a little bit about where we are in the project, and I can give you some information about what we have so far in terms of visualization that shows the relationships between those subcategories. And one thing to also point out is that there are a lot of different subcategories of AI. So I pointed at just a few of them, but there are a lot, and those keep changing. So it's impossible to sort of put a number on how many there are. But yeah. All right, how do you assess the originality of ChatGPT responses? That is a very good question, Nell. How do I assess the originality of the ChatGPT responses? So in terms of originality, and again, this goes back to, in the way I'm reading this, let's say I ask it to write or give me some ideas for a movie. And I want it to be sort of an original, let's say I want to create an original film, original horror film, and I want you to create, a host of characters and create a whole story that had not been seen before. And so let's say it goes and it creates the characters, it creates the story, it creates the antagonist, it creates all of those different things. One thing that you can do to compare and contrast the originality is to look at what other horror films that are out there. Does the stories, are the stories similar? Is it truly original? Or is it just a derivative of those horror films? So I guess in order to gauge that, that's going to be based on, if you're the person and whatever whatever originality looks like to you, that's how you'll sort of assess it. All right, so Carol said, can someone track in reverse order all reliable resources used to develop GANs? Or since the backbone technology is proprietary, we only need to cite the developer as the source. So I think in terms of, are you asking if you are citing, or if I'm using a GAN and I'm citing that for a paper or for, as a resource, as a reference, is that what is that the question, Carol? So I'm going to assume that is the case. So if you're citing the GAN or any other type of generative AI tool, if you use that tool and you use that tool to help you create something, you'll want to cite the actual company, because there is no, at least to my knowledge, a single person or even a team that they attribute to ChatGPT 3.5 or 4, because there's a lot of people that work on this, and they've also used AI in the process of creating this. And so I think that's a good question also, Carol. So I also wanted to, because time is getting kind of wearing out. And that brings into question. So for ChatGPT 4, you can explore other GPTs. So other transformers that were created. If you have GPT-4, you have some of the picks by OpenAI, so like Adobe Express, Code Copilot, Social Butterfly, Software Architecture. They give you some that are trending, right? Then you have some that are created by the ChatGPT team, which you all are familiar with, DALL-E. You also have data analysts. This is something I have not. This is actually something I'm gonna work on this week, because I'm going to run a workshop in a couple of days on data analysis, and so you can actually, according to what I saw, you can upload an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV, and it'll actually analyze your data. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that also works out. And then, of course, if you go down here or up here, you have top picks, you have DALL-E, you have writing. So anything that's for writing, productivity. So Canvas, I think some of you already mentioned earlier that you use, Web Pilot, Scholar GPT, Finance Wizard. So let me try Finance Wizard. So I know that for some people, like for myself, I manage my own stocks. I manage my own retirement portfolio. So I use a lot of different applications to help, because when I first started out, I wasn't very knowledgeable on it, but now I like to think that I've gained the knowledge, but I use some of these tools for this. So for example, I have a lot of stocks in S&P 500. So what I'll say is predict the next year of the S&P 500. So if I prompt it to say that, considering current market condition, historical performance trends of the S&P 500, I predict the S&P 500 will experience a range of fluctuations over the next year. Well, in a lot of cases that happened last year, although it was sort of trending up, there was a lot of different fluctuations. You also have inflation. So, this is one way you can use this. I can also ask it, what current geopolitical issues can affect the S&P 500. So U.S.-China tensions, Middle East conflicts, Brexit and European Union stability, U.S. domestic politics, global pandemic response, but this is kind of already, so in this particular case, as you can see, we're kind of out of the global pandemic right now. So this isn't really something that I would probably worry about, but cybersecurity threats and tech regulation is definitely one. U.S. domestic politics is definitely one. So if I'm managing my stocks and determining where I'm going to put money and where I'm going to take away money, this is a really good tool. But again, you still have to, like I said, in this particular case, you still want to make sure that you're cognizant of what's going on. And again, you want to, take this information to see if, these particular things are actually, how deep are these tensions? And what's going to happen over the next 5 years or next 6 years? So that's just, there's a lot of different GPTs that you can use, programming. So again, so if you're using code, Python, I think someone mentioned that earlier, SQL. So if you're doing databases or you're creating non-relational databases using that, math, tutor me. So these are these are some of the other GPTs. And then for Gemini, I'm going to switch to Gemini real quick. I have obviously and again, I can't reiterate enough to use caution. And that's one of the reasons why I told you all to create or to use a different Gmail account. Because as you can see here, where are we at? Your conversations are processed by human reviewers to improve the technologies powering Gemini apps. Don't enter anything you wouldn't want to review or use. So they are telling you right beforehand, they are going to use your information. All right. So again, you can use it or not use it. I have Gemini Advanced, so I've been an early user of Gemini, and so I got Gemini Advanced for free for a couple of months. So similar to ChatGPT, you can generate a futuristic image. You can ask it to write code. So it does all the different things. One thing that I have used is CSS. One thing that I sort of do on the side is I host and build websites for people. I've done this for faculty. I've done this for students. I've done this also for my own projects. So I've used it to create CSS. Works very well, extremely well. It also, which takes down the time I have to use for writing code. And again, similar to ChatGPT. So here I have a vegan diet, which again, this is something that I've been I'm a practicing vegan, which means from time to time I might slip and eat a hamburger. I'm trying to. It's a struggle. I'm doing really good of eating more vegetables, but this is something that I've sort of been using I've used it to check out all the different diets that are out there, and this has been working for me in sort of coming up with my own plan, and this has helped in doing that. And for this, I ran this. I showed students how to build a Roman numeral calculator. Did that in Python, and then I was doing the research on quantum fusion and using AI. So I don't know if you saw The Man Who Fell from Earth, which was on I think it was on Showtime, but it was about quantum fusion. So being the nerd that I am, I wanted to look a little bit further into this and see how or if they're leveraging AI for that. So I've been using it for that and also looking at journal articles. One other thing I wanted to show is Notebook LM. I realize again, if you are on the call and you're from a different region, this is only available in the US. So you would have to use a VPN and you would have to point to a US server. This is not illegal. However, I know that there have been some people who have been blocked. And so Google have been known to block if they look at that as unusual activity. I've ran the VPNs and I haven't had that issue, but it could be an issue. If you want to work around, email me. If you don't want to use a VPN, if you're interested in learning about other workarounds, email me or contact me afterwards, and I'll put together a list of resources and different sort of ways that you can do that off the record. All right, so with Notebook LM, you basically create a notebook, but what it does is it allows you to use AI as a collaborator. So if you're I think someone mentioned they were using AI to create a systematic review, or if you're doing a literature review, let's say you're writing an article, everyone has They're different, a different mode, a different way that you sort of, you write an article. Some of you might, you go through the databases, you might download 10 or 15 articles, just read the abstract and that's it, and determine whether or not that article is relevant to your research. But I've sort of been using this, and I've showed students in the classroom who are now using this in Mason. And I'm actually writing a journal article about my experience in doing this, where they're using it in the classroom to write a research paper. So I'm going to put in here, I'm just going to create something. I'm going to say test. I'm going to save it. And now I'm going to add a source. So you can go directly from your Google Drive. If you open PDF, it'll go directly from your system or a text file, or you can actually copy text from a file or from a PDF, and you can do that. I'm going to go directly in. I'm going to use this article, what generative AI means for trust in health communications, right? So now that I've uploaded this article, I'm going to select it. And what's really cool about this is you can add multiple papers. So if you're doing a research project, and let's say they're all on healthcare communications, you can actually add those different PDFs up there, or it can be a mixture of text or PDF. And you can actually query all of these simultaneously, but I'm just using this one article, and I'm going to ask it, what is the relationship of trust regarding healthcare? I might have spelled that wrong. Healthcare communication and generative AI. All right. So I'm asking that question. And ChatGPT has a version of it as well. One of them I showed you was the that data tool where you can upload an Excel sheet or a Google spreadsheet or a CSV. So here, generative AI has the potential to change the way that healthcare information is produced, consumed, and trusted. Transparency and explainability are critical to build trust in generative AI-powered healthcare communications. So it's giving me this information. Conversational agents may seem more trustworthy due to their confident and authoritative tone, but they may not be able to account for nonverbal cues that doctors use to assess a patient. So now I might want to take that. I'm going to paste that in. Can you talk more about nonverbal cues that doctors use to assess a patient? Body language, eye contact, facial expression, vocal cues. So again, they're pulling this information from that article. Then down here, here are some of the other things that it have already suggested that you can use. Can you identify challenges presented by conversational AI in regard to its potential impact and trust in health information? All right, so now you have other information that you can also use. Hitting credibility cues, transparency issues, authoritative tone, bias and personalization, potential for hallucination, right? So this allows you to, obviously you still want to read the article, but if you're doing a literature review, and this is something I'm going to try to sort of integrate into my process, besides just reading the abstract, is to sort of further use just a prompt to learn a little bit more, some basic information about what's in this article. And because it already generates other questions that you can use based on what's in this actual article, that works. So you can obviously, add other, and you can prompt it for more. And even later on in the line, when you look at your research question and the research problem that you're trying to, or several research questions that you have, you can plug those in. So whatever the overarching research you're doing for your articles, whether it's in the healthcare or whatever field that you're in. If you are doing any type of scholarship, or if you just want to know more information about something, you can. If you have a PDF of a book, so if you go to Directory of Open Access Books, download a book. Doesn't matter the size of the book. Again, you can ask it about what characters in the book, who is the antagonist, some of that information. So if I want to consider reading this book and I have, let's say, a Nook, or if I'm using my iPad, I might ask it certain questions that is important to me that helps me determine whether or not this is a book that I want to read. I've been sort of using this now for the last month. So far, this is experimental, but this is also a part of the Google Labs, and I'm going to type that in. This is a part of the Google Labs suite. So again, if you've created a account, here are some of these. So we already went to ChatGPT. You saw some of those applications here. Here with labs.google, you don't actually need to have a paid account to use these applications. I have Gemini Advanced because I'm also sort of playing around with using Gmail. So it has access to your Gmail, your documents. I don't have anything in my documents that I really care. All of that stuff is all play or test information or test data for the purposes of using this. But you can use ImageFX. So for one of the images that I had earlier in the slides, I used ImageFX to generate that. Instruments, Gemini extensions. This is, again, if you're using, Google Flights, Google Hotels, Google Maps, YouTube. If you have a Google Workspace account, and I've been using Google Workspace for a while, you can use it for that. So you can prompt it and begin working there. You have DJ mode, so if you're into music, again, that's Gemini. You can use Gen AI and Chrome. And then Notebook LM, which I just showed you, you have Music FX. So if you have a musical idea that you want to work on, you can try it for this. Google Arts and Cultures. This is a way to learn how to prompt and improve your image reading skills. If you want to write a duet or visualize and organize in new ways to collaborate with AI, you can use this tool. And we looked at the scripting, one of the scripting counterparts in ChatGPT. This is Gemini or Google's version of it. So you have all of these different tools in here that you get for free that you wouldn't get in ChatGPT unless you actually pay for the paid version. All right, so
we're gonna go ahead and conclude. We're a little bit over time, so we'll let people go. There were a few questions in the Q&A. I've copied them down, so what we'll do is I'll probably post the answers next week, since it's actually difficult to email this many people. My emails tend to get blocked. So I will share those questions with Trevor after and post the answers next week. So thank you all so much for coming. Trevor, this was really informative, and there were already a bunch of great comments in the chat about how well everything was explained. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me. Peace.
Have a good day.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.